This is NTV.
Hello there. How are you this evening? We are coming to you live from the Karura Forest, my favorite place in this city. And I love Karura Forest because it is such a serene environment. And why are we here today? We are talking about climate change. Such a perfect setting to have this discussion. And I have with me such an able panel to talk about how to survive climate change, the impact that climate change has had on Kenya, and how you can join this conversation, and what you can do in order to live a climate smart life. Now, if I could just introduce my panel, sitting right next to me is Mandisa Mashologu, the Deputy Resident Representative of Programs at UNDP Kenya. Welcome, Mandisa.
Thank you.
We also have Dr. Chris Kipto, who's the Principal Secretary in the Ministry of Environment. He'll give us the government perspective of why this climate change conversation matters to Kenya and why we are going to COP26. And next to the PS, we have Dr. Mithika Mwenda, who is the Executive Director of the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance. Now, Mithika has been very vocal on this climate change thing across Africa and also has attended very many COPs. So his expertise on this panel will be quite interesting. And finally, we have Adrian Lumayande Toro, who is the co-founder of Wings of Empowering Pastoralists, and he's from Marsabit County. He's joining this panel as a young person so that you can have the young person's perspective of climate change, what it means to them as young people, and if they feel left out of the conversation, if they feel involved in the conversation, and how they can participate more in this conversation. Now, if we can just get right into it. So the world is going to Glasgow next weekend to talk about climate change. Something that the world does every year between November and December to talk about climate change. Let me start with Mithika. Do these meetings ever really help?
Well, it does, but there is dividing perspectives on whether it is useful or not. Some people have found this actually useless and jabbering and the tourist expulsion, and many other things.
Mithika, I'm sorry, we've lost your audio. We've lost your audio, so we are going to come back to you. Let me come to Dr. Kipto. From where you sit as the ministry, how has climate change impacted Kenya?
Climate change has impacted Kenya in a big way, and we just need to see the examples that are there even now. We have just, the president just declared that more than half of the country is going to be under drought. And just a few months ago, we had the problem of rising lakes, where many lakes in Rift Valley really rose, and the impact was huge. Many schools were submerged, infrastructure, livestock, the loss and damage that we have suffered from climate change is a lot.
Yes.
Just from rising lakes alone, about $166 million. You're talking about 17 billion Kenya shillings.
That we lost because of the rising lakes. Yeah. So those are the examples of climate
change. Just examples. But when you look at the last 10 years, we have had a drought almost every year. So you talk about climate change is being manifested in many ways. You have sometimes floods, sometimes we have drought, sometimes you have rising levels of our seas or our lakes, even just the temperatures, wind. And so you find variability in the weather, and this is being manifested in many ways. But what is more important is that the temperatures have risen. And when you talk about climate change, is because if you compare the first 30 years of Kenya, like in Africa, and the last 30 years from 1990 to 2020, the temperatures have increased. And this is scientific. Yes. And with this global warming, that's when you see now glaciers being melting, yes, and you find the lakes rising, and find some this variability where you have drought and floods. And this has had, every time you have both, it has impacted us. And yes, you see this reflected in food security challenges and even issues around communities, inter-community fights because of lack of resources.
Because of lack of resources. Now let me bring in Lemayan here. From Marsabit County. Marsabit is one of those counties that is always hit by drought. Every time we talk of drought, Marsabit has to be there. Every time we talk about livestock deaths because of drought or lack of rain, Marsabit has to be there. So as a young person who grew up in Marsabit County, how have you felt climate change affecting your life as a young person?
Right. As a young person, first is there's so much uncertainty about the future. Climate change has really brought a lot of uncertainty about our future. And if you look at the case of Marsabit, where the droughts, we always have droughts, the people who are most affected are the youth, who are actually out there taking care of the herding livestock. So they have to go travel further, be in conflict areas, and actually just put their lives at risk, right? And I think this conversation is timely, because we are the leaders of today, right? Not the leaders of tomorrow. And so the involvement of youth is really critical to this discussion, right?
Great. Let me come back to you, Mivika. Mivika, we were talking about the global meetings of climate change that happen every single year. Are they really necessary?
Yeah, I think I was saying that some people doubt whether they are useful, but the point is these are multilateral processes which are as important as national processes, because climate change, first and foremost, is a global problem. And so if it is a global problem, it can be solved through global solidarity, that there are countries which, and the science of it is that it's a transboundary issue, and it has to be solved when people sit together. And there are those who are affected, there are those who have caused the problem, and now we need global policies which trickle down at national level, and that way you can see now how do we address the issue like the PS was talking about, issue of loss and damage. Just simply is the drought which we are experiencing, the floods which we are experiencing, and the science tells us that we are not the cause of this.
Yes. Medika, I think your microphone has gone off, so the technical team is going to fix your mic in a little bit.
Or am I the one who is interfering with it? Is it okay now?
The technical team will handle it shortly to figure out why your mic keeps going off. Yes, but while we get that figured out, let me bring in Mandisa into this discussion. These meetings, now we're going into COP26. They've happened for 26 years. Have we achieved anything?
I think we've definitely achieved a lot, especially going into this next meeting, because respective countries globally have been working on reducing their targets on gas emissions, and proud to say that Kenya was one of the first countries to make a firm commitment to reduce their emissions, and we as UNDP are a proud partner in all of the countries that we work in to make sure that we can help governments with a full of society approach to make sure that this can happen. I think one of the things that we're definitely seeing, especially as we are in this decade of action towards the SDGs, is that there's no planet B. And we have to work on this together. So I'm very positive about the global action and the collective commitment and the work that has been done here in Kenya.
And just to...
Midika, you want to try again?
Yeah, I just want to relate that to what they are saying to help Kenya to reduce emissions. I think these are some of the challenges which we have. The PS are saying here that we require 17 billion.
We lost 17 billion to rising lakes.
So when you concentrate on reducing emissions, rather than building resilience of communities, addressing adaptation, that is now where now some of these policies fail. Because, and as the civil society, we have been having problem with this. In the north, in countries like Kenya, or the whole of Africa, the priority is adaptation. How do we adapt? How do these people in Marisabit adapt? And it is as simple as that. How do we, because now they have lost their livelihoods. Right now you see photos everywhere of their animals dying because that's their source of livelihood. And in where I come from, a farming community, last season we did not harvest anything. These are just manifestations of climate change.
Yes.
Yet the international community, including the UNDP, focus on what is framed outside, without focusing on what are the priorities of a country like Kenya, which now is suffering, the half of the country is suffering drought. So
Yes.
the question is, are we, these international frameworks, are they relevant, or is it because of the fancy names and
Giving them
the
fancy
concepts,
names like COP
COPs
something.
and those others, and you know, CDM, Clean Development Mechanism. Now we have NDCs, National Determined Contribution, where
Yes.
Kenya has designed a very good. In fact, the Kenyan, one of the Kenyan, I think PS will tell
Yes,
you
we
that
updated it.
they have submitted.
Yes.
And look, ask him how much they have raised as a country, because
only
they are
has
conditional.
13%.
They are conditional on external
Funding,
support.
yes.
So UNDP, maybe she can tell how much as UNDP of Kenya mobilize on that. Because at the end of the day, and I can bet, that document will enter as a document.
As a document, yes. Now, that's a good point to bring back the PS. A good point to bring back the PS here. He mentioned the NDC, the Nationally Determined Contribution, which is the plan that you're required to submit to the UN climate process as a plan of how you as a country, you will be climate proofing yourself. And in Kenya's NDC, we want to cut our emissions by 32% by the year 2030, and we need $62 billion. And where do you have that money?
Good question. Yeah, you know that this COP that we are going is going to be conference of parties to the convention called UNFCCC, United Convention Framework for Climate Change. It's going to be number 26. And you know, in 1995, we moved from the convention to the Kyoto Protocol.
Yes.
From the Kyoto Protocol, so we are going to have another conference of parties to the Kyoto Protocol, which will be meeting number 16. And just recently, we had 2016, we had the Paris Agreement, which we signed up. And so this, we're going to go for meeting number 3. It will be the 3rd meeting of Paris Agreement. Now, in the Paris Agreement, it was agreed by all the signatories that every time you have a submission of your national determined contribution, you must be more ambitious than you were before.
You don't think you're being overly ambitious?
So this time, despite the fact that Kenya is contributing less than 0.1% of greenhouse gas emission, we said we still will take up and show leadership as one of the countries, because we have been having that record. You know, even UNEP is in Nairobi. We want to show that leadership. So in our NDC, we have indicated we will need 6.2 trillion Kenya shillings over the next 10 years.
Which is bigger
to
than our
mitigate
budget.
and to adapt to climate change.
Yeah.
For mitigation alone, we shall require about 1.8 trillion Kenya shillings for the next 10 years. But to adapt to climate change, which is really the most difficult one, we require 4.4 trillion Kenya shillings. Now, in this NDC, we have made a commitment that as a country, we are going to make an effort to raise 13% of 6.2 trillion Kenya shillings. The balance, which is 87%, we shall rely on international climate finance. And we already have funding from GCF, from Green Climate Finance, and many others. But this is now what we are going to, when we go to COP, Kenya is joining other African countries under what we call the African Group of Negotiators, and the AMSEM, which is African Group of Ministers, to ask for the countries that are responsible for emitting for a lot of what we see as global warming. They need to put more money than they have done. And so we are asking for more ambition on adaptation, more ambition on mitigation, and more important, on finance.
On finance.
Yes.
And Adrian, the PSC mentioned we need money for adaptation. I'd like to hear your perspective as a young person who lives in a community that is very vulnerable to climate change. What does adaptation mean to you?
Right.
What does it look
Just
like?
before I get into adaptation, right, with regards to the COP26, and I think we need to move away from boardroom discussions, and now we go to implementation, right? Because drought isn't coming to the table. You know, we really need to move away from talking to more of how do we get the actors on the ground to do the work that is needed to mitigate climate change. Adaptation, right, looks to me in terms of youth getting jobs out of their livelihood activities. Indigenous youth, for example, and pastoralist youth really earning money from their daily livelihood activities, right? And if we are able to do that, then we're not changing systems, right? We are basically just empowering what is already happening and using this to empower our youth. Right.
You said not changing systems. Not changing systems. That means working with the environment as it is. Yet we've got, it's even one of the things that the government is pushing for, agriculture, farming, crop farming in these areas. Is that something that would work for you?
It may be a bit difficult because of, if we don't know when the rains are coming, then it's very hard to make crop harvests, right? What we understand is livestock production. Why don't we bring in the Kenya Meat Commission to really work on these adaptation mechanisms that are already happening? Yes.
By working with the environment as it is.
Yes.
Now I'd like to bring in Mandisa here. You've had the PS talk about this ambitious plan of raising more than 70% of the money we need from rich nations. Is that something that's achievable? Is it possible? Considering the fights that Kenya and other countries have had in the previous climate meetings?
I think we should go back to our basics in terms of the fact that the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, are our global commitments that we've made, whether it's government, private sector, civil society, a multi-sectoral whole-of-society approach. So yes, we have made that global commitment that we're going to work towards these SDGs. And climate action, as we have seen, is a fundamental issue in order for us to be able to reach that. In terms of food security, ensuring livelihoods, and sustainability of our environment. So yes, I think with this advocacy that particularly the African ministers can put in place in those global forums, the power of the voice of the youth is also another aspect that we can use. And let's not forget, we are sitting in Karura Forest where, you know, individuals pushed and advocated to make sure that this happens. So we know results can happen. We even have proof of how Kenya can make a difference when we're talking about climate action by having a Nobel laureate coming from Kenya.
Yes.
So I am convinced, but when we look at financing avenues, it can be the developed countries. We need to look to private sector, and I think one of the things that we're working with the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, various other ministries and key development partners here in Kenya who are also committed to supporting and helping us as the UN and UNDP to help in this process. We are working to make sure that we can mobilize those resources. But it has to be innovative financing, there has to be a strong commitment, and really holding all of us to account in terms of making this happen.
Mithika, would you say that the government is being honest when it says that it is committed to the climate agenda, considering, if we look at Kenya specifically, considering while we say we want to cut our carbon emissions, had it not been for the court stopping us, we would still have implemented the coal agenda?
Well, you remember our campaign, our coal campaign, and you know the government, you know how the government functions. The government needs money to drive its development agenda and to look for money from anywhere. For us as the civil society, what we have been doing is to try to convince the government that assets like the coal and even the oil, I think the era of coal is over, because even if you know the campaign we drove with the Lamu team and those others, until the people who was giving them money, they backed off. And why? If you go to the United States, just to give you an example, just very quickly, is that when Trump became the president, he was all of us saying that he's going to return the coal industry. But what happened? He left without even establishing even a single coal plant. Why? There was no profit for it. So those are going. So our campaign is to tell the government, I think this is not a viable investment any longer. Invest in renewables. Kenya actually is a leader in renewables. So why do we waste our money and our assets and resources in putting money into coal, whereas we have vast resources in terms of wind power, geothermal, and the solar? Why? So I think that pressure, I know that it is not the government, it is only the investors who understood and they kept off. So one of the things we are saying, and the story of just transition, it is inevitable. Go to Norway now. 67% of cars now are electric cars. So what does that shift tell you in the future? So we are going to have stranded assets, which we are not going to have. And I normally tell people the story of this mineral, which was very yes. No one wants to touch it. It was a very precious mineral. That is what is going to happen to coal. That is what is going to happen to oil in future. And actually, it is the high time that we transitioned. And this makes, if we tell the government and private sector that this makes the business case, then they are going to invest in it. And that's what the United States and those others. So it is African governments which are lagging behind. Yes. That now, and so you can see now we have shifted our campaign not to tell the government this is danger, to tell them there is no business in this, so we'd rather invest in the future.
Great. So that's a great point to take a commercial break now. When we come back, we'll hear from the government. If the government really thinks it's truly committed to this climate agenda, or if in some way it self-sabotages when it talks about climate change. We'll be right back after this break.
Did you know at Ruiru Mabati Factory, we offer free delivery within the same day? Did you know at Ruiru Mabati Factory, you can open an account and lipa pole pole at your convenience? Did you know at Ruiru Mabati Factory, you can get customized sizes according to your roof plan to avoid wastage? Call us now on 0111 050 700. Ruiru Mabati Factory, mali safi kwa bei poa.
I have to admit, I didn't like Sukuma Wiki when I was growing up, but now I've created a way to make Sukuma Wiki tastier and meatier. I simply add 2 Royco beef cubes and the end result is a rich, meaty flavor. And today, I have brought along my harshest food critics for a taste test. My kids.
More, please!
Royco beef cubes. Add 2 small cubes for a big, meaty taste.
Babe, come tuoshe vyombo.
Okay.
Babe, cheki, wacha niende hivi na come.
The only thing we can be sure of are the best data rates from Airtel. Changamkia 1 GB at 50 bob. Dial star 544 hash and select option 0. Airtel, the smartphone network.
A lion!
Ah, yes, the king of the jungle. Time for a Red Bull.
Red Bull? Still, you'll never be faster than a lion.
I don't have to be quicker than the lion, just faster than you.
Red Bull gives you wings.
Wadamaya is an annoying village boy from Ghana who is on a journey to change the narratives of Africa.
Quite daring, and he has visited 23 African countries.
This is my most visited country in the world.
Find out why Wodemaya has fallen in love with Kenya and why for him life is not all about money.
Life is not all about money. Life is about impact. If you make impact, definitely you make an income.
Wodemaya. This Saturday at 7:30 p.m. on NTV.
Let's talk about the money. Tell me, what did you do with the house? What happened with that?
I've already put the house in the market, but I'm sure you know that that takes time.
And Vanessa, huh? Tell me, where is she going to live?
Hey there. You have nothing to worry about, I promise. You're Tammy Andrade, right?
Yes, and you
Relax. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Ruko. I'm Vanessa's boyfriend. Look, I'm sorry if I scared you, but you see, Vanessa's in a bit of a difficult situation emotionally. She told me to come talk to you because she really needs to see you. Shall we go?
Ni rahisi, buy ama redeem na ushinde na furahia na Optiven.
Welcome back. If you're joining this discussion, this is the Nation Leadership Forum talking about climate change and the impact it has had on Kenya and Africa, and how the government can climate-proof this country, and how you, as a citizen, can change your life and adjust your life accordingly in order to live a climate-smart life. And we are coming live from the beautiful Karura Forest. Such a breath of fresh air to be here. Now, before we went on break, we were about to hear from the government if the government self-sabotages when it comes to this conversation of climate change. Because on one end, you will hear the Ministry of Environment talking about all these fancy plans that it has and requires money. But then the other government ministries operate in some sort of tone deaf, in some sort of, I don't know how to describe it, but you'll find, for example, when you talk about the Ministry of Transport, how many trees they cut down in order to build a road. How are they made up for those trees that are cut down?
Thank you very much. I think I need to correct that government is serious about dealing with climate change. And you just need to look at, first of all, the number of policies we have put in place. We started with the climate response strategy. We followed up with the climate action plan from 2013 to 2018. And then we have also climate action plan from 2018 to 2022. We have come up with adaptation plan from 2016 to 2030. We have a climate change policy. We have a climate change finance. We have an act of parliament that creates that's actually called Climate Change Act. So in terms of legal and regulatory framework, we have actually done a lot. Number two is that now, under the current government, under the leadership of the President Uhuru Kenyatta, we have a whole of government approach to dealing with issues. And the structures of government are very clear. Even on the NDC, we all committed as a government, not the Ministry of Environment. Look at the mitigation sectors that we are focusing on. We are saying energy is going to be one of the areas that we are targeting, the 1.8 trillion shillings I spoke about. And energy sector, we have done very well in making it green. I think our energy mix now is over 80% renewable. And we are also focusing on clean technologies, focusing on efficiency, around energy efficiency. That's one sector. You look at the other sector is agriculture. We want to see 50% of reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture sector. And that's one of the sectors we have targeted. The other sector is forestry, which is what we are focusing on, land use change and forestry. And here we are very serious around raising the 10% tree cover. Yes. The other area is greening manufacturing, that all industrial processes have to be green. And we are saying we need sustainable ways. So now you're talking about green manufacturing. And that is the agenda that our Ministry of Trade and Industries is pursuing. Then on West, we are saying we're now going circular. We want to ensure that we don't have any of the dandoras where we dump waste. We have gone circular. We have a new policy framework which is now going to transition us to circularity, where we derive as much value as possible. So instead of going to Dandora, we have Material Recovery Center. We have a law now that is going to be passed before end of the year, which will make it a must for everyone to segregate waste at source. From your house or wherever you are, you must segregate waste. You will not transport waste which is segregated. And you shall not dump waste in anywhere. It must be Material Recovery Center. And this we are working together. Now on adaptation, we are actually talking about, even in agriculture, smart agriculture. And we, through the Meteorological Services department that is under my ministry, and with the World Bank, we have a project that we have targeted all the 47 counties to install equipment that will help improve accuracy of weather forecasting. And we will be launching this before, hopefully before end of the year, where now we'll be talking about, we'll not say weather around Nairobi. Yes. We will say weather in Karura will be this much at this point. So there will be accuracy. So climate information would be very useful for the farmers, like my colleague who says is in the pastoralists, the community. The pastoralists will be able to be told this is likely to be the weather, and they can therefore use that information to adjust. The farmers can then plan at the right time. So there is a lot we are doing to learn with the reality that climate change is going to be with us. So how do you then adopt to it?
Yes, I'd like to ask something that Adrian mentioned about livestock production and giving them adaptation in line with their livelihoods. What we've seen so far is that we're trying to make these pastoral communities look like agricultural zones when they're not naturally agricultural zones, and then that leaves them more vulnerable whenever it fails to rain because the crops die. Why are we not focusing on, why are we not keen on implementing the needs that the communities there actually want? Why are we forcing them to take on agriculture when it's not what they want?
I don't think that is true, because we are not forcing agriculture to be taken by everyone. In fact, livestock sector is a key sector as far as I'm concerned within the government, and there's so much that the government is doing to promote livestock production. You're talking about disease-free zones, which we are trying to establish. There's a lot of effort to try even and do water harvesting and ensure that even within those remote parts of the world there is an attempt to harvest the water. And we're also pushing in the issue of tree breeding now through our CAFRI to try and see that we get the right species for trees to do well in that area. And we are even talking about a livestock export strategy that I know is in place. In Bajuma, there is a place where they're trying to do some feedlots and do fattening, and therefore be able to take goods to, the animals for export. So there is a lot in that sector.
Okay, maybe just to add on that the point here is to make sure that we have nature-based solutions. And just to build on the point that the PS has raised, for us as UNDP, we launched the Africa Borderlands Center in Turkana last year, February. And part of this, the major component of our work is ensuring that we are engaging with communities, with key stakeholders, understanding the context so that you're finding solutions that work for the communities that we know will have direct benefit, and working with them to make sure we find solutions. So in our programmatic efforts, and as part of the different interventions that have not only been under Ministry of Environment and Forestry, but as the PS has articulated, that we're looking at a multi-sectoral approach. We definitely make sure that our programmatic interventions are making sure that they meet the needs of the beneficiaries, because then they cannot be sustainable. So just to say that there are different paths, and we recognize that sometimes mistakes are made, but we also learn a lot from some of the mistakes that we've made in our programming to make sure that we can continue to improve.
You know, Zainabu, if you listen to peers outlining the policies which we have, you realize, you feel as if now we have solved all our problems. Because they are very good policies.
But the problem which we have is implementation. That is the biggest challenge. We are very good in, as a country, Kenya, we are very good in doing policies. I'm not blaming the Ministry of Environment right now,
Yes.
but that has been our practice. Look, go to Ethiopia. In fact, it is always said that Kenya does the policies, Ethiopia implements.
Yes.
Because you go like their green economy strategy, it is actually one by one, almost, from the Kenyan. And you see the way they are implementing. Look, their tram, the Addis Ababa train, it is actually a green economy project. So there are so many things which we can gain out of this. The only thing, and our fear, and actually to give government credit, right now government is doing extremely well. Look at the president when he was in the US. He was in meeting with Joe Biden. First thing, climate change. Every forum, I think we have really considerable political will really to address climate change. But we can do that to a certain extent because we lack resources. The most important look is that we have a very, very ambitious document, but when we have a lot of priorities. Right now, even if we had set aside money to address climate change, policy implementation. But now look, now the money, that money is diverted to address emergency, like that drought. Yes. That is now what has been happening. So we could be having very ambitious plans, but we are hampered by our incapacity, vulnerability, and that's why we see it is only conditional on international commitment. But do we have it? It's another case. And actually, when we go to the COP, one of the things we are going to be asking and putting pressure is for the international community, the donor community, to meet their commitments, because that is the biggest challenge we have. They are talking about OECD. If I looked at the OECD report, they were talking about that they delivered $100 billion per year. But can you tell me, this pastoralist young person, how much did he get out of that? Yet they could, and that's actually why we are driving the locally led climate action, so that we contextualize action to what these pastoralists know, that we are not going to impose solutions. They have their own solutions on climate. They know how to adapt. They know how to build resilience. But when you go with the concept of climate smart agriculture and then we impose agriculture on them, there is another day when we were arguing with somebody. They want them to cull their cows because they are emitting, so that they reduce emission. Somebody comes from Netherlands or somewhere to come with the concept of climate, so you have to kill all your cows because now, so that you can address adaptation, they are emitting, cut your emissions. So these are some of the things we have to be very cautious. So these solutions will be locally led, community owned, people driven. And if we do that, then we are going to have a solution which is actually this bottom up, not the bottom up which we are hearing about the economy, no, but bottom up from the people. Yes.
Right. Adrian. Yes, I have to also mention that we have a very progressive Ministry of Environment. The CS and the PS are actually very willing to engage with youth, and the state agencies like the Net Fund, the Kenya Water Towers, the Kenya Forest Service are actually working hand in hand to empower the youth to adapt to climate change. And one point you mentioned was about local communities creating their own solutions, right? I think even the Climate Change Act of 2016, Article 5, actually mentions the role of indigenous knowledge in the role of in really climate change adaptation. So that should really be emphasized in our national climate action plans to make sure that indigenous knowledge is captured and reflected in all our sort of work that we're doing.
As a young person, Adrian, do you feel sufficiently involved in the whole climate change conversation, or do you feel like it's happening above your head?
It's a bit of both, right? I'm here today, I'm being involved in this conversation, right? But more needs to be done to actually have us as drivers of this agenda, because we are the ones who are going to implement the policies that are being set right now in the future.
Okay, so let me come back to UNDP. What are the priorities when you go to COP26? What are the priority areas?
Well, I think I'm speaking as UNDP working in Kenya, so really the priority areas that we are definitely working hand in hand with the Ministry of Environment and Forestry and other partners that will be going as a government delegation, are really to present a new program of support. It's a new UN joint program on tree growing fund. It is led by the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, but this is actually looking at how we can have a significant contribution in terms of promoting the 10% tree cover. This will be an opportunity to launch the fund, follow up on that commitment on the donor contributions, private sector engagement, and making sure that this can be something that's brought up at the highest level for Kenya at COP26. We also know that we'll be having the launch of the global report on NDCs, and obviously this is a contribution that looks at the different countries and the commitments that they've made on their nationally determined contributions. It already sets the scene for the advocacy work that the government and the Kenya mission can do when they're there on the ground. I think another important thing really is also just the voice of youth, and making sure that they keep that pressure up and saying that, you know, we need to make sure that we are saving this planet for future generations. So those are the three sort of priority messages that definitely we all under the leadership of the national development priorities for Kenya are supporting to make sure that there's very good presence at that global engagement.
Meeting. You mentioned 3 billion fund. There's a project that the ministry is trying to implement to plant at least 2 billion trees across the country and boost the tree cover to at least 10%. There's been talk that planting trees is not enough, is no longer enough. That in previous years it was enough to absorb the carbon in the atmosphere, and now it's no longer enough. Do you agree, PS?
Yes, I do agree that it's not just about planting trees. In fact, in the ministry we have now changed. We are saying growing trees. It's about tree growing. It's not tree planting, because tree planting, you just plant a tree and you move out. Tree growing is like when you get a child, you have to take care of that child until that child is able to move. So we want this tree to be able to grow and withstand the vagaries of weather. We know, so up to 2-3 years at least you can say you have taken care. So the focus of the ministry is on tree growing, and we have a national strategy which we are pursuing. Now I want to assure my friend that now it's about implementation. For us, we are serious about implementation. It's not about talking about new strategies. We already have enough. In this strategy that we have now is talking about all degraded gazetted forests. So what are we doing to address that? All degraded water towers, all areas around wildlife sanctuaries and others which are degraded, mangrove ecosystem which are degraded, our urban spaces which also are not very good. We are focusing on that, and you can see the results already. And under the program that we are working with UNDP, we are saying the current forest cover is around 7.2%, and our target is 10% by next year, as set by His Excellency the President. So to reach 10%, we need to successfully grow 2 billion.
Between now and next
Between
year.
now and then. And we have made some progress, and what we did is to focus around especially seed production. So we have improved the capacity of Kenya Forest Research Institute, which is the one that does research and provides seeds. The capacity now of KEFRI has been increased from 6 seed centers across Kenya, and by end of the year we'll have 18 seed centers. It had a capacity of 15 metric tons when we started the strategy. Now the seeds in KEFRI are 60 metric tons, which can translate to over a billion seedlings. And by end of the year, when we have these 18 seed centers, KEFRI will be having a capacity of 300 metric tons of seed, which when translated to seedlings will give us at over 2 billion per year going forward.
How many trees have you planted so far?
I don't have the correct figure now, but we have really moved in that direction, and I think we will be releasing the report very soon. But we have an app now that we also use. Everyone that plants a tree, we make sure it is captured, and therefore it is moving on. It's like a dashboard that we are able to monitor. But we're asking anyone who is engaged in tree planting to ensure that they also record this. But I just want to say on tree growing, we require a lot of money, and we are relying on private sector. For instance, we want our youth like the gentleman here, who is engaged in tree planting. We want him in his tree nursery. He can register with Kenya Forest Service, and out of that nursery, we guarantee offtake of whatever he has in his nursery. The problem is that if you rely on the ministry, and I have a budget cut, I am unable to guarantee the purchase of the trees because I have suffered a budget cut. And that's why we want sustainable ways to finance tree growing, which is what we are working with the UNDP through international sources, and I think we are looking forward to doing more. We have also asked the private sector to support us, and I want to thank Equity Bank. They have pledged about 35 million seedlings to support this process. Absa Bank, 10 million, that's what they have told us. I&M Bank, 5 million. Kenya Breweries, 20 million. There are so many private sector that are already supporting. So we are asking private sector to support us, and then support youth, what she was calling nature-based enterprises, so that in this era of COVID, if you're in area of tree planting or tree growing, you, and as a youth, as a woman, you can get income out of that. And we also want to use the money we get to also employ the youth. You know, and like now under Kazim Tani, the president announced yesterday that we will also use part of that in forest, so that we are able to sustain jobs, what we are calling green jobs. Thank you.
Great. Now, Mithika, as we go into COP26, what are the priority areas for you as the African civil society groups?
Yeah, it is to look for money to do exactly what the PS is saying, because we have a lot of plans, and that money, and that's why I started by talking about multilateral processes like this one. It's the way we can put pressure, so that now we get more money from those people who have caused the climate problem. So one of the priorities would be to push for increased money, either through multilateral processes, either through the Green Climate Fund, or other bilateral, as long as it reaches the people who are at the front line of climate crisis. Number two, we want really consideration of the African continent and African countries to be recognized as special, you know, given special consideration, special needs region, because we suffer. I think you are the one who shared the report, the state of Africa climate, state of climate report yesterday from the WMO, and those are every report cites Africa as the most vulnerable, but we have never done anything. So you cannot compare us with other regions. So if we secure that, then we are going to secure more money and more resources. The other point we want really to look at is the issue of loss and damage is very critical, building resilience for communities and adaptation. And there are so many programs, and there is a lot of appetite for the mitigation. You know, everything is mitigation centric. You know, there are donors like more to put money more on mitigation, because there is no return. You know, you can't get profit, for instance, on adaptation, and now that is the challenge which we have. So for them, it is invested. In fact, the way the NDCs are designed, they are designed as investment tools. So in the design, so no one thinks about adaptation. So I attended a meeting just recently. We were with the CS for Environment, Keriako, in Netherlands, Global Commission for Adaptation, where we were talking, we want to push within very prominent voices to see whether there is money which is going to be put. It's the priority for Africa, all African stakeholders. But the question is it going to be sufficient? The African Development Bank, for instance, during that meeting, was they are raising $25 billion US. That's I assume that is around 2.5 trillion Kenya shillings for the whole of Africa. And look at what the PS is asking for the Kenyan budget. So really we have a problem, and we need to push that. There is no political will at international level, and we need to try to see how we can do that. So when we go there, we forget we go there as Africa. We forget whether we are the gap. We forget our problems here, where our challenges, where differences with the civil society. We go there as Africa to push for African provinces, because that is actually like a forest. We go there to...
If I could just interrupt you.
Yes.
One of the criticisms that African negotiators have actually faced at most of these COP meetings
yes.
is that they're blindsided by bilateral talks
yes.
to distract them so that they are not there when the key discussions are happening. For example, this rich nation will come and tell Kenya, you need a dam in Turkana.
Yes.
I have them. You don't have the money. I have the money. I will give you the money. You build the dam. Just support my position.
Yes.
There.
Yeah. Yeah. That is what has really, really worried us as the civil society. The African position has consistently been weakened because of those individual nationalist kind of priorities. Yes. Because now we no longer go to negotiate. We go to look for money as countries. And so these countries, industrialized countries, are very tactical. They use many tactics. One is manipulation. So they use that. Then intimidation. If we have seen governments being intimidated to accept what they want, and the other one is carrot dangling. So they come and dangle that dam. We have some 2 billion. So now they soften you. So because some of these government functionaries will just look at money, so they forget the bigger picture. That is how Africa has lost it. So we hope, and as the civil society, we put pressure with them. Please, you will get even more once we secure the bigger picture. But when you succumb to the manipulation, intimidation, carrot dangling of these industrialized countries, you will never achieve. And actually, we fear that is what is going to happen. So every country, every delegate now is armed to see. Right now, if you go, like any country, they are now lined up bilateral meetings. How I'm going to get money for this, how I'm going to get, that is where we have lost it.
PS, have you lined up any bilateral meetings at COP26?
Yeah, of course, we will have several side events. So we will participate at COP, both at the signature events and the bilateral and even other side events. But I just want to say that as a country, we are joining the other African countries in ensuring that our voice is heard, because we need Africa's voice to be heard in a big way. First, we are saying all the NDCs, not the bilaterals first, but of course you can't avoid having bilaterals. That's why we have bilateral relationships with all the countries of the world. That is not. I think it all depends on what you ask for in your bilateral, and I don't think going bilateral is a problem. But the point is this: we are saying we want to see more action from the historical polluters. Those who are responsible, and we know that more than 80% of the world's GDP is by only a few countries of the world who are responsible for the emissions that we see and the global warming. As one of the African countries, we are saying we want to see more action by those countries. So they need to raise their ambitions in their NDCs so that the mitigation target is higher. When they raise their targets higher, they must match that rise in the target with action. So we want to see higher climate action on their part by ensuring that they move to ensure they reduce mitigation. If they reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, then the adaptation measures that we have to take, and that's part of the world, will be less, because the less of global warming, the less the need for us to adopt. The second issue is adaptation. We want to see more on adaptation, more action on adaptation. Yes. In Copenhagen, during the COP that took place in Copenhagen 10 years ago, the developed countries agreed to put $100 billion by 2020 going forward every year. That has not been achieved. Now we are saying we would like to see this time round a demonstrable evidence that there is that money that they have put. Yes. Because then we can be able to use in adaptation, because we are actually suffering a lot for very little that we have done in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. So this is what we are joining the other world. So we are saying match then the actions with finance. Yes. And I'm happy that countries such as the US, who had gone out, opted out, have now come back. Yes. And we have seen demonstrable evidence of what they are really going to bring on this COP. Yes. So for us, we seem to be more optimistic this time around that something good will come out of
the COP. Yes. Now we need to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue with this discussion and then also go into the next steps of what to expect once you reach at the COP and what happens between now and then and also after the COP. We'll be right back.
Get the best value for your money by subscribing today for Classic Bouquet at only 899 shillings for 30 days to enjoy 64 channels. Classic Bouquet. Premium content on Star Times. Subscribe today.
Hey, now that's hitting the right notes. When life gets boring, we bring out our play. You see, playfulness is in our DNA. It's in the way we move and laugh. It's in the way we walk, the way we rock, and how we just don't stop. You feel me? We add color to everything, to every day and every dish, because the world needs our crazy. We're the different flavors that make life more exciting. We're the ones who add color to every moment. Fanta, color every moment.
Nivea Black and White Deodorant protects me and my favorite outfit. That's why I feel confident and free with 5 times anti-formula. I stay fresh and protected for 48 hours and my clothes stay stain-free. World's #1 anti-stain deodorant from Nivea. Try it. Nivea's 5 times anti-action formula and 48-hour protection is also available for men.
Game Ibambe with the ABSA Assist, the official banking partner of EPL in Africa. Stand a chance to win 1 million Kenya shillings monthly grand prize by depositing into your personal or business account. 10 lucky winners will get to double their deposit of up to 100,000 Kenya shillings. The more you deposit, the higher your chances of winning. That's Africanacity. That's ABSA.
I'm growing into every moment.
Nurture the moment. Minute Maid Nutri Defenses, fortified with vitamin E and zinc to help improve your defense system.
This is NTV.
Yajayo kwenye NTV jioni.
With the removal, we are reverting to closure of bars and restaurants at 11 p.m. or the time allowed by the licensing authorities.
Waziri Mutahi Kagwe afafanua hotuba ya rais kuhusu kuondolewa kwa kafyu baada ya patashika ya jana kati ya polisi na umma.
That upon the lapse of the 14 days without the first respondent having made the appointments, it shall be presumed that his power to make them has expired, and the 6 nominees shall be deemed duly appointed.
Mahakama yaamua Rais Kenyatta alikiuka sheria kutowateua majaji 6 na ana siku 14 kufanya hivyo, la sivyo wataapishwa tu.
Walitoka saa 6 usiku, wakaenda kulala huko makaburini huko chini. Wengine msituni.
Sasa hii nataka tuwapeleke hospitali, wakaangaliwe na wakapimwe.
Mamia ya wanafunzi wa sekondari ya PCEA Kambala huko Molo warudishwa nyumbani kuuguza majeraha baada ya kugoma usiku.
The ones from China are sponge. They are just fish.
Size zake ni different na hii ya neck. Inakuwa ngumu, very hard. Unafikiria ni mafuta.
Na je, samaki mwenye ladha, mtamu, mwenye ngozi nyororo na bei nafuu ni Mchina au ni Mkenya? Ndio mjadala wa leo huko Kisumu.
Shopping guide. When ordering online, always place your order from a secure connection such as Glovo. don't use an e-store that requires more information than necessary to make the sale. Glovo, you order, we deliver in minutes.
37% off Whopper plus medium fries plus 350 ml soda. Order from Burger King on Glovo app and pay only 550 bob to enjoy this offer.
Kuwa smart na ujaribu Zenka 0% loans for first-time borrowers. Zenka, smart loans for smart people.
Let's get straight to it. Ready for whatever. We gon' ride. Line 'em up. Let's go toe to toe. Tell 'em pick a side. Put in work. We don't play no games. Watch it running high. Savage mode. We gon' keep it G. Yeah, you know.
Wow, thank you for your time. How juicy.
Juicy. Niko fiti maze maze niko fiti majamana mabenti wako fiti. Juicy fruit, juicy juice.
Great, welcome back. We're still having this conversation on climate change. Now, if I can just speak some feedback on social media. Raphael Mwai on Twitter says, I'm really happy you're having this conversation and I need support. I'm looking for 10,000 trees. Sky's the limit. Perhaps the PS will be able to will be able to know how to help with that. There's also somebody else, Tonui on Twitter, who says this conversation, I'm finding it a bit elitist because Kenyans don't know how to grow trees. You've talked about growing and not planting trees. You're not telling Kenyans how they can do that. So maybe you'd like to tell Kenyans how they can grow these trees?
Thank you very much. I want to, you grow trees by first planting. Once you have planted, you make sure you nurture the tree by ensuring that you provide water, you tender it until it grows. The problem is that most of the time we plant trees, you take a picture, and you say I've planted and you go. You never even check to see whether that tree has grown. So the point is, we want to focus on tree growing so that anyone who plants a tree must be able to check until ensure that that tree has grown. So this is why we are saying we focus on tree growing rather than tree planting. It's not that we have really moved away from tree planting. We just want to focus on the aspect of growing, which is about survival rate. So that the trees survive, and you can then say, last year I planted, and I've gone back and I've seen, like what you see now in this Karura, these trees were planted a few years ago, they have grown. And you can say there is success. Thank you.
There's also Ruto Ismail on Twitter who says, I agree with you, we have good policies, the problem is implementation. Peter Ikua says, roadside cleaning by road agencies. He has attached 2 pictures there of how the road construction, they are cutting down trees, and he disagrees with you and you say, the Ministry of Roads is actually involved in the environmental activities, yet they are cutting down trees to make room for those roads. But I'd like to come back to Mithika. Mithika, before we went on the break, you were talking about how African governments are supposed to be speaking with one voice when they go to the COP, yet they allow themselves to be distracted. How can that be prevented this time around?
First, it's not even African governments. You know, there has been, we are split in several interest groups. You know, Africa, you know, like what we call LDCs, least developed countries. We have around, most of them actually, out of 54, 32 are African countries, 2/3. Yet now they want to, some of them feel that they want more to lean towards the least LDC group than that. Why? Around politics of it is that Kenya, Ethiopia, Morocco, and South Africa, the 5 countries are benefiting more from African group, and so we don't want, we want to go where, you see, those are the divide and rule, you know, tactics, which, so now, and then you find Britain, UK, what, giving them money. You see, that is dividing. Then there is group of small highlands states. Yes. Some of them are from, so eventually they are fragmented. And once they are, I cannot tell you, the African group of negotiators, which we had 10 years ago in Copenhagen, which the PS was talking about, is what we have now. That they were very strong. But to be honest now, we have a big problem, because even now, the African group now even drives its own even projects. So when you now start negotiating for projects, from a person you are putting pressure, then you are compromised. And these are the challenges. So we really need to work on that. We are working with that with the African Union. Actually, it's very particular on that. It's very serious on that. The ministers of environment, the AMSEN, Africa Ministerial Conference on the Environment, the Committee of Heads of States of Government and on Climate Change, and the African Union, and those other interest groups are really concerned, because we can only secure Africans' bargain and hence the national bargain if we fight as a unit. If our voice can only be amplified if we work together, and that is what, as the civil society, we are telling our governments.
Adrian, I'd like to hear your comment here. As a young person, and we're talking about the core process, how would you like to be involved in this COP26 discussions?
There's a very important term that is used, intergenerational knowledge transfer, right? This knowledge that is seated in this panel and out there, right, it needs to be translated down to us. So how do we get opportunities to actually be involved in the conversation, not just speaking from outside where we are advocating for climate action and putting pressure, but we need to be in that table, seated in that table, having these discussions and learning from these discussions for the future, for our future, right? That's.
And coming back to UNDP, as a development partner supporting Kenya on this journey on climate action and supporting Kenya's initiatives to adapt and mitigate to climate change, do you go back and monitor how they've spent the support, if you give them monetary support, how they spent, or if they actually implemented the things they said they would implement?
Yes, I mean, for us as UNDP and the UN system, accountability, transparency of resources that are channeled through us, through other partners, the development partners who are here on the ground, and even other ways in which we mobilize resources from global or regional programs. So yes, we do want to make sure, and we continue to make sure, that the programs we support, whether it's through implementation, through CSOs, through government, and various groups, that we have effective monitoring systems in place. I just wanted to add the point that I think we should always think about the SDGs as our compass. And as you were rightly saying, that we can have a situation of divide and rule when we're looking at perhaps national interests or particular African economies that also have certain vulnerabilities. But I think if we remain as using the SDGs as our compass, which are our global development goals, which were agreed by us all, I think this can help us to remain more focused, to build back forward better. And I just also want to highlight that in terms of the Tree Growing Fund, one of the things that we have definitely made sure, UNDP being the technical lead and working with our sister agencies, FAO, UNCDF, and UNEP, is really to make sure that all of the different partners are engaging with government to make sure that this is part of the national development priorities. Vision 2030 is what we are here to support, so we want to make sure that all of our interventions are in line with that. Thank you.
PS Kipto, you're quite popular on social media. There are two questions here for you. One person would like to know, says, could you ask the PS why trees are being cut all over Nairobi, and what is the ministry doing about it? Is it reversing what they just said about planting trees? And secondly, why hasn't the Climate Change Action, why hasn't the Climate Change Council met yet you're talking about implementing of climate policies?
Thank you very much. I think this issue of trees being cut is an issue that we have taken up as a ministry, because there has been so much pressure on us Sometimes when we're in government, I don't come to national TV and shout on what I tell my colleagues. I just want to assure viewers that the Ministry of Environment is doing a lot internally to ensure that we engage our colleagues. We have actually said we want infrastructure to make sure that we respect the fact that it takes so long to grow trees. I was in China one time when they were doing an expo, in my days when I was in trade, and I saw a green field being set up, and trees, there is equipment that you can use to uproot a tree instead of cutting it, and actually transfer it to where it is required and you take it. So these are things we have done within government. I want to assure the viewers that we are doing, that we are working around that. We have engaged our infrastructure team to make sure that we avoid these instances where we have trees being cut. And this is what we are saying. It needs to be now, every infrastructure must be climate proof, meaning you have to be sensitive to the fact that you have to take care. I want to say one thing, that the biggest driver of degradation, forest degradation and deforestation, has been one thing: infrastructure. We have to give way. Everybody wants, you want a road, you want a school, so you have to cut trees. I don't think the ministries you see in Nairobi are only responsible. Even in the rural places where you have a forest, you cut the trees in order to give way for a school and for infrastructure. We must find ways to still relocate rather than cutting. Yes. And these are new things we are bringing in, new culture. I want to assure my colleagues, those who are listening, that my colleagues are really supporting us in this space. We have talked to them and we see them responding to this. I don't think they also like it, to get to all this criticism. So I think going forward you will see a lot of change, so that all our infrastructure are sensitive. In fact, we want to make sure that every infrastructure is able to have a component on conservation. Just like in water, so many dams are being constructed, but the dams cannot be sustainable. They are likely to be white elephants in the future if there is no component to put on conservation. So this is what we are saying. We need an integrated approach to project management, so that you focus on the project and others.
On the next one, about why the Climate Change Council hasn't
now
met
that
yet.
one, I want to say that there is a technical issue that was raised around the choice of who should be a member. Especially it came from the council, the civil society, and also around those who represent other groups. And so that was a handicap that came in, but it is being resolved. And once it is resolved, the council will meet. But that has not stopped us from moving forward. We have a fully operational climate change department in our ministry, and we have the minister responsible, we have ourselves, we have a whole climate change units across all ministries, and even in counties we are setting up now climate change units. And we are doing everything to mainstream climate change under the medium-term plans, and also in counties, the county integrated development plans. Yes. So I think there is so much we are doing already to mainstream climate change within government, either national or county.
Great. So there's also somebody else here called Kulmicha Idhani. Kulmicha says, hello, I'm from Marsabit, and I would like to hear how we can put measures to ensure sustainable development goals are achieved as long as environmental protection and enforcement is achieved. And he would like to hear that from you, Adrian.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think if we look at the dryland, the forest sort of cover in Kenya, dryland forests occupy about 45% of this. So how do we then bring the youth, right, into protecting and managing these ecosystems, create job opportunities for them such that the control is with the communities and not really outside in, but really inclusive, and everybody is, the youth are the leaders and the forefront at this conservation and restoration efforts.
A lot of the questions that are coming in are actually directed to the government. So unfortunately, we will not be able to cover all of them. So what I'll do is I'll collect them and give them to the PS, and then hopefully I will relay your responses to them. A lot of the questions are coming in about you and the ministry and what you say about implementation. But coming back to UNDP, how can Kenya better adapt to climate change? What more can we do beyond what we are doing currently?
I think, as stressed and brought out by my fellow panelists, I think in terms of policy, legislation, you know, we are there. The important thing is climate action and having the space and opportunity for different stakeholders to engage in making sure that this happens. So whether it's youth, whether we're ensuring that civil society also has a strong voice to hold government accountable, whether we're also looking at a multi-sectoral approach, that is also put in place. Financing we know is a key issue, particularly for the Sustainable Development Goals, for which all of the work that we're doing is very much related to the environment. And just to say that through National Treasury and Planning, Kenya is in the process and one of the pilot countries for an integrated national financing framework. And this really is to help the government and people of Kenya to be able to get a better indication of how resources are being allocated towards the SDGs and what impact they're having. So very thankful for this partnership with the EU, World Bank, African Development Bank, UNDP as a technical support to National Treasury and Planning. And this is pointing to the multi-sectoral approach and knowing it's not just government that can provide the solutions and the answers. We need to make sure that all of the key stakeholders are engaged.
Great. So we have just about 5 minutes to go, so we're going into the closing remarks. PS Kipto, as we go into COP26, what do you want Kenya to come out of it with?
We would like Kenya to come out of this first having convinced the international community that climate change is a reality and it is urgent. And it is something we need to take action now, not tomorrow. And that we need to see demonstrable evidence by everyone to ensure we have concrete commitments by way of action, ambition, matched by action, and matched by financing. And ensure that we collaborate together to tackle this. And I think I also say that back home, every Kenyan, I urge them that we must be stewards of our environment. That there must be something you can do at your level instead of just saying government. I think there is a lot that you can do at your level. That's planting trees, for instance, and those who are in urban areas taking care of our environment, waste management and all this, contribute to making a better environment for all of us. So this is an action that is urgent for all of us. It's just that the government is doing a lot, the policies are in place, but we have also told Kenyans now that we are more focused on implementation.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Mivika, how can Africa better prepare for this COP?
Well, through consultations, and I think we are well prepared. We were in Cape Verde with the whole of climate and development in Africa conference, where all governments came and the African group of negotiators so that we can come up with the whole Africa position. And that is actually one of the most important things. I know delegations are going even earlier so that they consult and come up with what we need to do. But most importantly, just as closing remarks, is that I want to underline the fact that it is the imperative of justice, climate justice, that industrialized countries do their part. What PS tells you is that we have done everything we could in our ability as a country. What is left is for those others the conditional contribution from international community. Kenya's maybe provided is that even in kind, 13% of what it was supposed to do, but that is the level we can go. So it is not actually a favor for them to do what they are supposed to do. It is their responsibility. So that's very important. Lastly, is that the issue of the economy-wide response to climate change. And this is actually why the Paris Agreement is different from the Kyoto Protocol. That now it has even make the provision of the non-state actors. The youth have got a very strong role there. The civil society. So I'm not going to come to the PS and ask him, I want to do something. In the past, we could do that. So you don't want to look, you go to do it. And I'm asking myself as Mithika, what are you doing to address climate change? How do you change your lifestyle? It's not only about planting trees and anything. It's about what you do. How do you change? Because we need to change. And that change should come from you. And that's what I'm doing even at local level. I go to my home now, every time I do 3 nurseries and give them free. This season, actually I'm traveling this night and we are going to be planting trees, and those are some of the actions. Our 15 days of action across Africa, where we are doing in 16 countries, where we are doing it practically, and we are planting trees and with young people all over Kenya and all over Africa. So do what you can, even use and go and plant a tree, and one day you are going to say, this is what I've done to change my climate.
Yes, thank you, Midhika. Adrian, your final words, what would you like, what is your message to the government in about a minute?
I think we can borrow from UNDP have actually engaged us as youth in the Red Plus process. So how do we get the government to give us a platform where we can meet as different youth and promote the spirit of Pan-Africanism, right? In coming together and coming up with solutions to these challenges. Second, the youth as well have to be proactive in looking for these opportunities. The opportunities exist, and so we have to take them up, as has been mentioned by the panelists.
Thank you. Mandisa, in about 30 seconds, your closing remarks.
I think I just want to say we want to work with social media, with the media, for NTV, with the ministry. We're launching an opportunity for Kenyans to engage, a platform to know what's happening about COP26, how the delegation is doing, and also to make sure that we get feedback when they come back and a clear direction forward. So communication, 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 action, action, action. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. There's a lot we can say about climate change, and also we didn't get time to get into the details of the report that was released just this week from the World Meteorological Organization, saying Mount Kenya is now an endangered mountain, because by the 2030s, 2040s there, it will be completely deglaciated, and making it one of the first mountain ranges in the world to completely lose its snow as a result of climate change. That's just one of the impacts of climate change that Kenya is facing, including the drought and the floods and the rising lakes. Unfortunately, we couldn't cover all of your questions, but P.S. Kipto will be taking your questions, and he will give you feedback on the questions you raised about implementation and climate change. But we'll leave it there for now. We do not end this conversation there. We can still keep it going on social media at Zain Wandati, at NTV Kenya, #NMG Leadership Forum. But for now, we make room for NTV Jioni to be updated on what happened on the news today. Have a good evening. My name is Zain Wandati.